Okay, so I'm just setting this up to record. Yeah, we'll start the video as well. And all I've done, there's no need for anyone else to be on the Zoom session with the person contacting me. So looks like we're about hamstring. So we'll just go ahead and get started. Other people can come in as the. Thanks, Dan. You're welcome. Other people can come in as they get started. So I'm going to go around the room and just have everyone introduce themselves. I don't know that we all know each other, so let's do that. And I'll start off. I'm Mike Burke. I've been teaching at College America in either Denver or here since 2010. Worked down in Denver for a number of years since we lived in Arvada. And then 2 years ago, we moved up here. We needed to, we wanted to downsize. So we downsized from 4,200 square feet to 3,800 square feet, 10%. Part of that is because we moved my now 98-year-old mother-in-law. So we're living with her, and being full-time caretakers is an interesting, let me tell you. So my background is chemistry, physics, and math. So they have me teaching, which is kind of an interesting phenomenon. That's okay, I enjoy it. I also do the algebra and statistics. Enrique and Jessica were in my algebra class last night. And I teach professional development, as well as some of the pharmacy classes. Actually, I taught mainly pharmacy and medical classes down in Denver because I spent 25 years in the pharmaceutical and biotech industry. So I knew a lot of that material. And I have a lot of practical experience with both pharmacy and microbiology and a lot of other topics. Plus, it gave me a chance to teach a lab class, and I love it. Obviously, I'm a chemist. I just love it. That's my background. I have two daughters. One is married and living in Denmark with her Danish husband. The other is possibly getting married this summer to an Australian and then moving to Australia. So we're halfway in between, which is going to be an interesting change of lifestyle for us. As one friend of mine said, I guess you're going to get a lot of frequent flyer miles. Considering that at one time in my life I was traveling 75% of the time, there is no great honor. But anyway, that's our background. My wife was a home health physical therapist for 40 years. So I got a lot of sort of practical experience with that. She's also an energy healer and a full-time caretaker. So we have interesting times. So let's start with you.
Okay. My name is Mimi, and I am from North Carolina. I've lived down here for almost 2 years. And I'm 23.
You're 23. Where in North Carolina?
Everywhere. I was all over North Carolina, but I'd say I grew up mainly in this little town called Burlington. It's like 30 minutes away from there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, but yeah, I've been up here for a while. I work out here. I have a daughter who's about to be 3 in August. I almost didn't make it in there because she was sick and throwing up, and I almost had to take her to the hospital. But as soon as that came home, she was better. So, you know, and that's nothing else.
Okay. Well, we lived in North Carolina for 20 years in the Triangle. I worked in Research Triangle Park.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, that's Raleigh Durham Chapel Hill.
Oh, yeah, I do know where that is.
Lived there for 20 years before we moved back out here.
Did you break it out with him?
As I told some of my friends, it's hot and humid all summer and cold and humid all winter. I don't like humidity. I was actually born in Colorado. My dad was in the Air Force. We moved around a lot, but I lived either in Virginia or, mid-Atlantic states or out here in the West. But I worked in the pharmaceutical industry. I worked in one of the companies there that doesn't exist on paper. But yeah, we enjoyed it. Both of our daughters were born there.
Yeah.
It's a great place to raise kids.
Yeah, it's very quiet.
Yeah.
Calm.
And over near Fayetteville, in a little town called Sonoma, was our favorite restaurant in the world.
I think I could possibly.
French Country Inn.
Was it kind of like, did it also have like a buffet option? Oh, that could have been something new actually. But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Really, best restaurant I've ever eaten.
And there's one close by now, and it's kind of like a Cracker Barrel, but it's not a Cracker Barrel, and it's a bunch of whole stuff and cooking, and it's the best. I love it. I recommend going there. If I could ever get the name of it, I'd give it to you next time you get back.
Well, we might have to do that because, Southern cooking. My mom was a Virginia farm cook. So she taught me to cook by you just put a little of this and a little of that until it looks right. Method. Hard to learn, but boy.
It's great.
Good stuff. Thank you. Okay. Enrique.
Enrique CEO, from Colorado. I've got 6 children, 2 grandchildren. I'm just glad to be here today with you.
I'm glad to see you back in class. Great. Your turn.
My name is Jessica Harbor. So I have a son, he's 2 in August. His name is Benjamin Thomas Harbor. So pretty much the entirety of my life, but I also work as a mechanic. I can pretty much call myself like half a mechanic since I don't really do a lot of intricate work, but I'd like to do a lot more stuff. That's why I'm here to start my own business and hopefully own a shop.
Fantastic.
I'm Carol Ann Allison. I've been here for about a year now. And I have 2 kids, stepson. My mom lives with me, and I also take care of my 80-year-old dad in his house and work full time. And I'm gonna advance my career.
How do you have time to do here?
Honestly, don't know
I
sometimes.
admire that. Believe me. Great. Wonderful.
So far. Other than that, 2 jobs now, which is actually one is at the Cracker Barrel. Although the lawyer just said that, but
Cracker Barrel is one.
that's pretty much what I do. School and work.
School and work. Yeah, that sounds great. Okay. Well, as other people come in, we'll put them on the spot. And meanwhile, this is about public speaking. And it's called communication and public speaking, but mainly you're going to ultimately, at the end of this class, you're going to be making a presentation to the class, just as though you were talking to a group of work peers or maybe the Rotary or some other organization. Okay? So that's going to be the idea. And what will happen is along the way, you're going to read a lot. You've already started. You've already seen a couple of the essays in already. You've already started that. In fact, one of the assignments for the rest of this week is going to be to finish all the 3 videos and writing a paper. There will be no assessment as in quiz this week because you have 3 assignments. And I really don't believe in working half to death. The other side of that is with 10 people in the class, and believe it or not, I do. It's my job. So, so you'll be doing a lot of writing, but always when you're writing, I want you to think, how would this sound if I were to be delivering this as an oral presentation? And so think about all of those things as you're doing this. After we take our first break, we're going to do an in-class exercise that has to do with language bias. Because one of the things that I've spent a lot of time studying in the last couple of years is language bias. And how our words affect not only the way we think, but the way others see us. And we see this a lot. We'll talk about that. I hope that Kimberly is online. If not, you can actually download it out of the week 2 assignment, or the week 2 in class assignment, or week 1 in class assignment activity. So we're going to be doing that. But first off, let's talk about public speaking. A lot of us think that public speaking is standing up in front of a crowd and making a speech. Well, yes and no. That is a form of public speaking. Right now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm speaking in public. I have an audience of 5 of you, absolutely hanging on every word I'm saying. But I've got the audience here. I'm speaking to you. And I have a message to convey, which is easy. I remember the first time I had to stand up in high school and make a presentation to an assembly. I went to a relatively small high school in Arizona. And my knees were weak. I was wobbly. And my tongue swelled up in my mouth. And, I had a hard time with it. And now I don't have a problem with it. And there's a couple of reasons. Number one, when you prepare a presentation, remember that you're the expert on the topic. Even if it's a topic other people in the audience know something about, you know what you're talking about better than they do. So remember, when you're doing that, you're the expert. In my pharmacy classes, I have students write papers, generally about a drug or a treatment or something like that. And when they start to speak, I remind them that they're the expert. Every now and again, somebody will say, "But you know all about drugs." Well, the answer to that is no, I don't. That's not possible because there's a new drug every day. So I don't know all about drugs. But the other thing is, even if it's a drug I'm familiar with, and I'm familiar with a few, we monitor my mother-in-law's drugs quite well. And so I'm very familiar with the things she's taking. My wife and I are fortunate. Neither of us take any drugs at all. So I don't have to worry about us. But we do monitor my mother-in-law. So there are some drugs that, yes, I know a fair degree about. And when I was in the pharmaceutical industry, I was managing drug development projects after I left the lab and went more into the management side. So I was managing drug development projects. I guarantee you, I learned a lot about those individual drugs and their competitors. But I will tell you another thing is that every one of my students in the pharmacy class has written a paper about a drug that I know about. They find something that I didn't know. So I look forward to that. So remember, you're the expert. Now, I've spoken to groups, lots of groups, as few as 2, to as many as about 2,500. And I'll tell you what, I'd rather speak to 2,500 people any day. Largely because you're in this cavernous room, and each person's about that big. And you can't tell if they're listening to you or not. And 2,000 of those 2,500 are paying attention to the word you say. They're inside to get out of the weather. And the 500 or so that are listening are only half listening. And maybe of all of those 500, 5 of them might get up and ask you. So it's real easy to speak to a big group. Two people, however, are paying attention to everything you say. And if you slip up, they're going to nail your eye. So you have to be real careful with a group like that. So it's not real difficult. And the thing to remember is what all of the public speaking advocates say is look at everyone in your audience, but don't focus on any one person. Because you're not speaking to one person, you're speaking to everyone in the room. So sometimes you might just be looking above the heads of everyone. Well, I guarantee you, if you've got a group of, say, 50 people out there in front of you, you're looking above their heads, everybody thinks you're looking at them. If you're looking in their direction. So it doesn't really matter. And don't worry about getting everything perfect. Because everybody slips up. You just have to keep going. Don't get upset if you miss a word. Believe me, I missed a lot of words in presentation. I just did one last summer in Los Angeles with a group of about 100 people. And I stood up and I started talking and I blanked out on 8 pages worth of information and just flew right over it. Nobody knew it except me. So don't worry about that either. Be like an actor. Actors are I'm not asking you to be an actor, but actors are people that learn very, very quickly. If you flub a line, keep going. The audience probably doesn't know it and won't miss it. Unless it's a play that everybody's seen 100 times and there are people in the audience that are reciting along with you. My daughter does that. My older daughter, she majors in theater at Oberlin College in Ohio, and is a director, a very, very talented director. She's also a very good actress, but don't ever tell her that. She'll deny it like crazy. She just doesn't like it. But she will see a play once, and she'll tell you every single line of the play. And it's really kind of annoying. But there are people like that. But most of us don't do that. Most of us get along with that. So public speaking isn't very difficult, but it's very critical for you to get used to, because no matter where you are professionally, you know this, Carol Ann, because you've had to do it. No matter where you are professionally, you will be talking to people. Even if you're just talking to a prospective client about what you're going to do for their landscaping project, or you, Jessica, talking to someone at Grease Monkey about what they need to have done with their car, that is a public system. And this week's second assignment is actually about how you structure these communications with other people. In this particular case, you're being asked to look at delivering bad news. Now, that's always an interesting proposition, and none of us like to deliver bad news. But there's lots of ways to do it with very effectively. And so, part of your assignment 2 of this week is actually to look at that and write a script for doing something, delivering bad news, and how you would handle it. There's where we're going this week with public speaking and communication. But I want to talk about what is communication. Now there's an old line, one of my favorite lines. The biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has been achieved. How many times have you been talking to someone, maybe a spouse, maybe a schoolmate, a parent, and you realize that they have totally botched up with it? You think you're being as clear as fresh spring water. And they are seeing a pile of mud. They're not understanding the word. So we have to be aware of a couple of factors. First off, if there's any way to misconstrue something that's said, somebody's going to do it. Sometimes it's deliberate. My wife has a cousin who's a lawyer, an ambulance chief, and he will do that deliberately. And he used to do it regularly until I looked at him one day and said, "You can either stop it or you can, go home." And he started stopping playing that game. But nonetheless, some people will do it, but most people honestly don't understand. Caroline, you may have some experience with your 80-year-old father. I'll let you in on another little secret out of my life. My father is still alive at 101. And I was trying to talk with him. He lives outside Washington, D.C. And I was trying to talk with him on Monday. And he lost it. First off, he started asking what I was doing, calling from his son's phone number. "Dad, this is." No. How do you even know my name? Blah, blah, went on. I mean, he had gotten it into his head that some stranger was calling from my phone, and I could not convince another one. And my mother-in-law misconstrues everything. She's deaf, essentially, and she refuses to put fresh batteries in the hearing aid, which I think is deliberate. Pardon?
At least you wear them.
Only because we say don't come out of your room without them. Because we chase the back many times. But she, even so, she misinterprets. We have the issue. I can't remember what we were saying this morning, but she decided we were talking about potatoes. And we wasn't even a plant. Much less a vegetable, So but people will do that. So we run into it. We expect it out of the elderly and those who are moving into various stages. Fortunately, my mother-in-law's dementia is really mild. My father's is increasing. At 101, I guess he has a right to, But it makes it difficult on family. But communication is something that we need to remember. Clarity is what you have to strive for. And clarity means careful choice of words, of tone. It's really easy. I found myself moving into this when I was talking to my dad on Monday, and trying to tell him that, okay, Dad, we're not getting anywhere with this. I've got 40 people coming over for lunch. I need to go. And he would just blow right through it and start talking again and asking me how I was calling from his son's. Finally, I had to hang up on him. But, it's very frustrating. And I found myself getting angry. Of course, you can't do that with a person who's having comprehension troubles. It doesn't do the slightest bit of good. So we have to tailor our message, our words, our tone of voice, and even our thoughts about the person that we're talking to that person and to their capacity for understanding. And that includes audiences. It's very, very different talking to a group of adults like you than trying to talk about public speaking, especially to some third graders. Right? They just don't have the vocabulary. It really isn't there. A few do, but not very many. So you really have to look at how you're saying what you're saying. Look at your audience. I used to speak at a lot of scientific meetings, and so my audience would have people from everywhere on the planet. How do you speak to somebody from Central China whose English is limited to, I need a drink of water. You can't. So again, you have to look at your audience and decide who you're going to speak to. You know, so basically, I was speaking to people whose comprehension of English was sufficient to understand what I was saying. And I didn't care where they came from. But as long as they understood the language, and of course the official language is English. So it is, you have to know your audience, you have to know who you're talking to. And we have to remember that we're dealing with, in many cases, people we don't know. People whose capacities we don't know. But we don't want to speak either so far over people's heads that they are bored, which of course is one of the topic of this week's discussion, right? Or one of the topics, a possible topic for this week's discussion. Or talk to them to where we're insultingly simple. And that's a difficult balance to achieve, especially if you have a broadly mixed audience who would have different abilities to comprehend what it is you're saying. And what I mean basically is it's not that they don't have the ability to comprehend, they don't have the words to be able to do so. So you have to remember that your audience can be very, fortunately, if we're staying here in this country, most of our audiences are going to speak English, even if it's English as a second language, they will understand it. We have a lot of friends in the Persian immigrant community. And they're all religious refugees from Iran. And when they come in, their young people pick up the language, just lickety-split. No time flat. The little kids are speaking very good English within a few weeks. The teenagers might take a couple months, but pretty soon they're doing well. The parental generation, the 30 to 50-year-olds, take a little longer because, quite frankly, as our brains age, we have a harder time learning a new language. It's not that we're not smart; it's that our brains are not wired. Because every language has its own unique sound. There's a story about the Indian chief Sequoyah, who decided to take their language and give it an alphabet, so that his people could learn to read and write their own language. So he did. His alphabet consisted of 84 different characters, and they were for the various different sounds. And they were so simple, unlike English, where A has about 6 different sounds, more if you include all the diphthongs, there's vowels and stuff. More. We only have 26 letters, right? So we have a problem there. Sequoyah wrote his alphabet, and even the adults within a week could read and write their own language because the symbols duplicated exact sounds. Remember I told you one of my daughters is married to a Dane. Danish has 27 vowels. Because you've all seen some of those languages, the O with the slash through it, with the little dots over it, and the mechin above it, and all the other things. All of these are different sounds. If you know the code, you can read Danish like a Dane. But you have to know the code. So in English is a difficult language for a lot of people to pick up. First off, there's no such thing as regularity. Had the experience one time in China being in an English school. And this kid walks up to us and is studying English, and we're just sort of there talking to the students. This kid walks up to us and says, and tells, reads a sentence. And he said, now that's a simile, isn't it? And we looked at him and said, what? He said, a simile. You know what that word is? Simile. So I said, oh, you mean simile? He says, oh no, you started a lecture about the rules of pronunciation. At the end of the word, if there's an E preceded by a consonant, then the vowel that precedes that is long. And I said, sorry, you're talking about English. I said, this is actually derived from a French word. And he just stared at it. Because of course, he hadn't learned. And Chinese is actually a fairly simple language to speak. To read it with the characters and everything, a little more complex. But their characters are symbols for visual images. And so they're constructed that way. So they didn't have any idea. Their teachers didn't know. Now, the Chinese are really looking for English speakers, native English speakers, or very fluent English speakers to go to China and teach. They don't treat them very well. Well, they have a different attitude about living style. Chinese is a much more collective society. And they're used to living in groups, and they're used to space. They're used to no space. You know, you go into one time we were in Hong Kong, and we were visiting a Chinese family, and basically we were sleeping in a closet. A bed just barely, not even as wide as a single bed in our society. Two of us, good-sized Americans, in there. So there's space. There are issues of space, and so it's very interesting to see this cultural difference. The cultural difference is reflected in the language, and we see that in our language. Our cultural differences are reflected in the words we have. Everybody knows the story about the Inuit people of the far north have 13 different words for snow or something like that. And it all depends on the texture. Here we talk about corn snow, powder snow. I mean, they've got words that really describe something so exquisitely because that's what their life revolves around. So language itself is something that is a difficult thing. Translations are awful. We think of English as a complicated language. Well, think about language that's been around for minimally 2,000 years, which is Arabic. Arabic is one of the most labyrinthine languages on the planet. It's richer than English can even dream of being because it is huge, and the subtleties of its structure, subtleties that English doesn't have, and makes it virtually impossible to properly translate an Arabic word. For people to say that every word has 70 meanings in Arabic and even context, which is an awful thing to contemplate. Right? So language is really, we talk about how hard English is, and it is very difficult for some people. The French, for instance. Everybody thinks the French hate Americans. They don't. They hate British. Because the British have been beaten up on for 1,200 years. But they can't hear the difference between British English and American English. So if you go over there, you're British. And that's why you get treated badly. When they find out you're an American, all of a sudden it changes. And you get treated very, very differently. Oh, you're an American. Je suis American. So it does depend on what you grow up with. The sounds that we have in Africa, the Xhosa language, has that guttural click that we can't duplicate, but their kids can say it because that's what they grew up with. So our language is important for us to understand its limitations and its strengths. English does have a strength. One of its biggest strengths is its larceny. We steal words from everywhere and incorporate them into it. And that gives it a strength and an adaptability that is missing in many, many ways. It also makes it very difficult to learn if you come into this society. Remember I told you that we know a lot of the Persian expat community here. The 40 to 50 year old, 30 to 50 year olds end up learning the language fairly quickly. It usually takes them a few months, and you can actually, if you interact with them, you can just see their facility growing. And then their parents, so like your dad's age, my dad and mother-in-law, although most of them don't end up living quite that long. But that age group never speaks the language. They understand it perfectly well. They won't speak it because they think they can't. As Henry Ford one time said, if you think you can do something, or if you think you can't do it, you're correct. And so they've decided they can't, and they won't speak it. Part of we sometimes will make a game of trying to get one of these older Iranians to speak English. We'll say something just as an aside to them quickly in English. And they'll say, oh yeah. So we know they understand. And I saw that in Arvada. When we lived in Arvada has a really large range of linguistic cultures. There's Russians and Ukrainians and Poles and Chinese and Vietnamese and just and of course the usual range of Spanish-speaking Latin American and immigrants and stuff. And we saw the same thing with that group. Their little kids, man, they speak English like they grew up with it, which of course, largely they did. And then the older kids, the teenagers, the early 20s, you can hear the accent very clearly, but they speak very fluently. And then their parents, it's a little harder sometimes. You get used to listening. Once you get used to hearing accents of various cultural groups, it's pretty easy to interpret what they're saying. We train our ears and our brain. Well, we train our brains. Our ears just transmit the message. So we train our brains. So we learn all these things. And in Arvada, we have this polyglot this year. One of our favorite little local groceries was the Eastern European deli. And you'd walk in there, and there would be the owners speaking some mixture of Polish and Ukrainian, and then would walk in a group of Russians and a group of Czechs and a group of Slovaks, and all these different Eastern European and Central European cultures walking in there speaking, and the kids would all be speaking this really jargonish mix of their native tongue, their mother tongue, if you will, and English. Just interspersed English. You'd hear every other word be English because they didn't have any words in their language that expressed the concepts that they were trying to use. So they mixed it. And then there were the older generation, which would come in and they would not speak English, but you could watch them listen to every word. So we knew they understood it. But that's just the way people are in about languages. So be aware that you need to know your audience, know who you're talking to. And don't dumb it down. That's a great way to lose your audience. You dumb it down they're going to dismiss you. And then after that, you could be delivering the most important message on the planet. So that's one of the things about the way we use language. The other is our body language. In America, or I should say in the United States, America is a broad area, right? In the United States, it's quite common to look people in the eye when you're speaking to them. Go down to Houck, Arizona, which is right in the middle of the Navajo reservation, the Native people. They will not look you. That's aggressive. They will not point at things. That's aggressive. Really, it's an interesting, different way of communicating. You'll see them talking on them. They'll use their chin to indicate what they're talking about. That's kind of interesting to watch. So there's this body language. And you can see it in the eyes. You can tell when people are listening to you. Their eyes are open. Their eyes are bright. Their pupils are generally a little more pinpoint. As soon as you lose them, the pupils go white. You know, because they're not paying attention. And you can see that body language. There's one of the things I teach in the professional development class is when you're going in for an interview, is get yourself prepared in terms of your own body image, your own image of yourself. And one of them is what we call the Wonder Woman stance. You know that stance. You know, the power stance. We know it as Wonder Woman because I first saw it in a TED talk by a woman who was talking about how women can show that they are every bit as capable. Because women are generally taught in our society to be sort of step backish. Maybe we're raising a generation that's willing to stand up. Our daughters are willing to. We've taught them to stand up for themselves. Many of our younger students here have learned you can stand up for yourself and show that you're capable. But we have, in the past, we've taught women to be submissive. And so this woman's TED Talk was about how do you come across as someone who's capable? Not as someone who's going to be hired in as a project engineer and then be told to make the coffee. Right? You go in with confidence. And that Wonder Woman stance, the power stance, is a confidence building thing. It seems kind of silly. The first time I heard it, I said, yeah, well, I'm going to stand in front of a mirror like this for 5 minutes before I go in for an interview. But you know what? People who do it, there was an experiment done with people who actually use the power stance before going into an interview. And people who sat in a submissive posture before going into the interview. Men and women alike. Those that used the power stance were 3 or 4 times as likely to get a job offer. So they reversed it. They took that same group, reversed it, so the power stance people did the submissive stance, and vice versa. And they went into a different series of job interviews. And the same result happened. The power stance people got 4 or 5 times as many job offers, even if it was the same people doing the submissive that did the power before. So it's really, body language says a lot. Are you confident? Are you open? Are you closed in on yourself? Now, there's a lot to be said to that. So when you look at someone, understand the society. Body posture is amazing. We were in a place, I talked about being in China and I talked about it. My wife and I spent 2 years backpacking around the world in the 1970s. Back when you could easily do that. It's not so easy anymore. But we went completely around the world and visited a whole lot of different countries. We spent a lot of time in places like New Zealand and Australia. But we spent a lot of time in the Pacific as well. And in the Pacific, we used to go up into the villages and just meet the people. In some of the villages up in the mountains, in places like Samoa. And we would just go meet the people. And We learned early on that when someone sat in Polynesia, and this is not an uncommon thing in other cultures as well. When someone is sitting there and they point the soles of their feet at you, it's sort of like I walk on. So I learned that when someone did that to me, I'd look him in the face, I'd look at his feet, and I'd look him in the face. And all of a sudden his feet got folded. Because I called his bluff. I knew the code. And they're not, they do things for fun, but they really are not an insulting people. But they were trying to show that they were better. And I was saying, no, we're the same. So you need to know the code as well. And there's a code to body language. They say in Native American people, you don't do the straight in the face look. That's aggressive. That's looking for a fight. So you don't do it. Other places around the world, if you don't look them in the face, you're always sort of looking down or over, then there's something wrong with you. You're a shifty-eyed, whatever. So it does change their perception. So when you're actually speaking, the nice thing about a giant group, the last really, really big group I spoke to was a group of Japanese scientists in Tokyo. This was about 2,500 people in the meeting hall. And there are some body language issues with the Japanese as well. But you know what? When you're on the stage, and to them, you're about this tall, right? They can't tell what your body language is. So I just acted like I was at any presentation here in the United States or Europe, but I've done a lot in both. And it was not a problem. But in one-on-one meetings, you have to be really kind of cognizant of the body language thing. Because then it's real obvious. Like sitting in the room with you guys, our body language is quite visible to each other. Now, since we know that there are all sorts of things, we don't necessarily put a lot of emphasis on the body language in an informal setting. You got your feet pointed toward me. I don't think that's an insult, because that's not our culture, right? So it doesn't matter. But you will find yourself that's one of the keys to good communication, is understanding your audience. What are their biases? What are their issues? What's their language? It's very, very difficult to walk into certain areas and speak if you are not of the dominant group. Here in the United States, the dominant group is the European white. Simple. We know that. It's part of our life. It's what we've been raised with. Everybody in this society knows that that's the dominant group. Okay? Does that mean the dominant group gets to run roughshod over anybody else? Well, morally, absolutely not. Practically speaking, it happens all the time. And part of what we need to be looking at, opinion, and this is strictly my opinion, but we need to be looking at how we can get away from such things, because everybody in this room is equal. We're all human beings. We've got 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. There's something between our ears that keeps them from rubbing together on the inside, right? And we all know how to use it. So we're all equal. Do we look different? Yeah, everybody in this room looks different. That doesn't make us different. It makes us equal. Makes it possible to recognize each other on the street. How would you like it if everybody looked exactly alike? Which one are you? Number 27 or number 384? So we really have to look at our audience and look at who we're talking to and how we're talking. we want to be effective. People need to understand what we're saying. They don't have to agree with what we're saying. A lot of things that are said that that we don't agree with. Some of them political, some of them religious, some of them whatever. But that doesn't mean that the people saying them are any less than we are. And so we need to be treating our audiences as though they're exactly that, exactly the same, all the way around the room. I don't care how big the room is. I said, when I've given talks to people from every continent at some of these larger meetings, from every continent, virtually any ethnic group you want to think of. And you know what? They're all nice folks. So why can't I speak to them? So communication is really about putting together an idea. And the structure of our communication really is to set the stage. You know, we introduce it. Sometimes it's called a setup statement. Sometimes it's called an introduction. And by an introduction, basically, you're saying, this is what I'm going to tell you. And then you tell them. I was told one time that the way to make any effective presentation is to tell people what you're going to tell them. That's the setup. Go through, be very careful about how you talk about what it is you're presenting to make sure it's clear and succinct and makes sense. Some people ramble. And so what you want to do is tell them what you're going to tell them, and then sum it up. Tell them what you told them. Repetition. If you're really trying to deliver a message, the key is don't make it too complicated, because you'll lose your audience when you get too complicated. And part of the reason is if you make it too complicated, it's likely you're going to lose yourself somewhere. I've seen that happen. I've done it. So keep the message, decide what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And don't embellish too much. You can throw in a few anecdotes. I mean, I didn't even think I'd talk about sitting with people with their feet facing toward me tonight, but it seemed appropriate at the time and it fit in with the message. So, don't be afraid to veer, but remember you have a goal. That goal is to give a message. So we're going to talk in this class, we're going to talk and practice public speaking and basic principles of communication, both verbal and nonverbal. And we're going to talk about issues of choice of language, which is something that I consider, even though you're using language verbally, our choice of words is often a non-verbal message that comes across that says who you are. So we're going to talk about that. You'll be doing a lot of writing assignments. I don't know how many assessments, quizzes type things we're going to have. This is the first time I've taught this course, largely because this is the first time CMM 201 has been taught here. So I guess I'm the experimental guinea pig, and you guys are my subjects as well. So we're all in this together. So during the course, another aside. During the course, if there are things that you think we should be doing that will make it better for you, please tell me. I am wide open. Because I've never taught, no one here has taught this class. I can't go to Katie or any of the other instructors and say, how do I teach this thing? Because there's nothing done. So we are inventing this class. So I'm actually asking your help in properly inventing this class. How can we make it more fun and at the same time learn? a lot. Because there's nothing wrong with having fun while you learn. Just look at your kids. Are they not having fun while they're learning and learning and learning? No, they are. My daughters are a little older. They are 33 and 30. Neither of them has any children. But on the weekend, I said we had 40 people over for Memorial Day. 13 of them were teenagers and younger. And the youngest, little Claire, yay high, running around, just having fun and having everybody in stitches because she was enjoying herself with a group of people she'd never met before. And she was quite comfortable because, we were celebrating her happiness. It was just a lot of fun. But we had a really, that was another sort of, I was thinking about that. As I was watching, I was thinking, I would mention that in class. But it was kind of an interesting thing to observe. Anyway, it's 7 o'clock and time for our first break. So, our only break, 15 minutes. So I will see you all back here. Or you can stay here if you want back here. You can actually see of these shells. Download what you can. Because by the next couple of days, it's going to disappear from your site, and then I'll have to do it. Okay. But download what you can. If you can't, if you need something that you're not able to download, ask me and I'll give it to you.
Yeah, for my, it just didn't have
Okay. Then I'll have to go through your grade book. And I'll try and get you sent everything you need by the end of the weekend. Okay. And if you need help, then let me know and we can arrange to meet the book plans. Okay. Get a good idea.
Yeah, like I said, if I need to, I already talked to my boss. Just told me I had some issues there. I had issues at work too with my whole situation. So, kind of carried over into that, and it just, like I said, I thought I could control it, but it just took over. I think I was just too stressed out with work, and with my wife and our situation, and just with the anniversary coming up with my dad's, and just kind of all compiled into one and trying to deal with everything. I didn't, and like I said, Katie said, you should talk to us, and I was like, well, I thought I could deal with it on my own. It wasn't, like I told her, I said, it wasn't a school issue, but it was an issue that affected my school in the long run. I told her, I said, whatever I can do, if I could salvage, at least get a pass, even if it's a D, just a pass.
Yeah, you don't want to. And you were doing fine.
Yeah, and like I said, it just took that one little bit, and with that, it just kind of just snowballed on me. I could get in the cover. I just kind of felt like it just giving in and just not coming back. But I ended up, something within me just told me, no, I have to go back.
Go ahead.
I don't know if it was just me or just, my dad's spirit talking to me, telling me, you got it. I've never quit anything before, and, it's just, I was just taking like the easy way out.
Yeah, that's, yeah. I'm glad you chose not to take it.
Like I said,
It's tough.
the road less walked is harder to go in, but the road is more common, because the water will always find the easiest path of resistance, And, this resistance, it's hard, but it's rubbing me on both sides of like the good and the bad, because the good, even though I try to do good, it just always comes out bad. It seemed like last month, no matter what I did to try to get ahead, it just always came out bad, no matter what. And that's why, that first drink is just like, oh, this is good. It relaxed me a little bit, and that's all it took. And like I said, for an alcoholic, that's the worst thing I could have done. Just say, oh, it's okay. Just help me out. That's all it took, and after that, I could not. And even, like my sisters in out of town, and that, I was kind of lying to myself and to them about it. They knew. It's just they didn't want to. I guess they didn't want to push me into that position like clerk. And just this communication, how you say things, tone of voice, things that you say, it's anything that anybody would say, especially my wife would say something just rubbed me the wrong way. And I just, like I said, the more I decided not to drink, it's like the more it was easier to drink. It seemed like everything was right there, just to, okay, here it is. Let's have one, just one. It would never end up like that. Like I said, I about lost my job over it, everything like that. It compiled to a whole situation where I was going to end up in jail. But it was just because of my anger, not being able to, get it out. And when I did try to talk to my wife, it just seemed like everything was, they would always turn it back, no matter what I tried to do. Even when I tried to talk to her the right way and not argue and try to get my point across. And like I said, now it just seems like it's just to that point where it's just, we haven't talked for a couple of weeks now, and it just, and it's still eating away at me, but I just don't know how to get over it other than just try to go to work and try not to. I try to talk myself up to not talk her down, and that's the hardest part, because I'm upset. I don't know why she's doing this or why she wants to talk to her, and I know the answers because of my doings of what I did, the way I treated her. And she always, and she puts it out there, but it's not in a bad way. She's doing it because she still cares about me. She still wants me to get my head out of my butt and get into school. She was, I know you're smart. I know you can do this. I know you. But for us right now, there's nothing with us right now. She was, but you are a smart person. You are a good father. You're a good provider. She was, you're still a good husband. She was, but just now between us, it's not. There's nothing there. Like she said, I killed that. I don't know if it's the love, because I know she still cares about me. She cares about my health, but I think there's just the connection there was severed somehow. And I don't know how to get it back. Trying just to do for me, like she's trying to tell me, just do for yourself, get yourself back on track, get this, get that, and that's the biggest thing, is just saying, okay, I gotta put my pants back on, get back into the groove and just start moving forward. And that's why I came back, and I've been talking to Katie about my last class, about the mod, what I do I just take an F, do I do this, do I do that? When I seen you and you said there was still a chance, and I'm like, yeah, I'd like to get a passing grade, even if it's just a D, just to be able to not have to. Because I still have some of the work that I had, the papers that you gave me. The only thing for my presentation and like the final test, I guess, would be.
Yeah, I'll have to get that to you. But I can do that.
Like I said, I do appreciate your help now, and trying to get him back, you know, at least get a passing grade.
Yeah, I would really like to see you do that, if you can. Everybody in that class could have obvious problems.
Yes.
And we were all getting worried when you weren't contacted.
And like I said, and that's one thing I've always tried to do is, you know, even at the beginning, when they were just starting off, you know, and that's why I said I thought I could handle it, because at the beginning it wasn't so difficult, but I didn't really. I guess to me, I wasn't accepting it as it, you know, I just thought it would go through a scuffle, you know, it'd be over. And
Yeah, and we all do that at times, you know, we never want to go past that, you know, stuff.
it just, like I said, it just was the actual part of acceptance. And once I did, it just, you know, it was too far gone to try to come back. For me, I thought, but I said, even just being with my kids over the weekend, just kind of helped me to refocus and see that, you know, I mean, my three youngest kids still need.
Yeah.
My daughter's 16, my boy's 12, but my baby's only 2 years old. If anything, they still need me more than what I would need myself and my wife. They're still kids, they're still growing. I still say to them.
Your other kids need you too.
Yes, my older kids do too, and they're the ones that are trying to get me also. They're helping their mom out more right now too. You know, emotionally and stuff. They're more. Well, all my kids, I try to push them to do more for their mother. My wife didn't have her mom when she was young. Her mom passed away when she was 2 years old. So that love of a mother has never really. She's always struggled with that. And I've struggled with it a little. I mean, I had my mom, but when me and my wife got together, she was always trying to break us apart. For 27 years, they tried. I mean, I look at it like they didn't succeed. It's like I succeeded in doing my own demise of that, because you follow those misconceptions, but you hold on to them for whatever it is, you know, and it just kind of. That's why I said, you know, I've always told my kids to do more for their mom, and I try to tell them now too. Is, you know, mom, the love of a mother is a very precious thing, because that's why now I don't have anybody I can go talk to, like my mom, like dad, or my grandparents, you know. And that's where I felt, I guess I could say, vulnerable, like to ask somebody else for help.
We have a hard time in this society, and we all. It took me forever to start really understanding that. If I need help, I can ask for it. The very worst I can hear is, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I'm right where I started. But if somebody says, yeah, what do you need? And it can be subtle, it can just be, let's go ahead and cut the call. Yeah. But we all need help. There is no such thing as this mythical independence.
That's exactly what Katie told me. She was after 27 years of doing what you've done. I said, I've never done for me. I said, that was 16 years old. Was the last time I ever done for me. I took up my wife, my children, and I was involved in 27 years I've done for them, for their betterment. And now that I'm at the point where, how do I better myself, right? The easiest, like I said, the easiest thing was ask for that. You want to go hard and come out. But for me, it made me seem like I was not the person who I've been on this thing. But like he said, you're not that person. Dynamics have changed dramatically with how your father passed away, you know, and then at the same time going through what you went through, you were destroying your marriage, and then your wife went, and then that threw a bigger wrench in the whole thing. So she kind of got me to thinking that, you know, it's okay to ask for help. We all need it at times. And that it's okay to say that, hey, I need some help. I don't know how more to do it other than to revert to my old ways and the simplest thing. Like I said, I got with my alcoholism for a lot of years. My dad was an alcoholic, but he passed away too. In a sense, I just kind of thought that's sort of like kind of connected to.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand that. But it really isn't a connection. And maybe it is your dad saying, get your butt back to school.
Yeah, I kind of
That's
know
why I
this,
kick it.
because I can hear his voice, telling me this, you're not a quitter, you're not a crazy.
No, you're
Everything
not,
we,
I know
everything we talked about the last year. Every day I hear different, I don't know if it's terms of advice that he give me, even though I didn't want to hear them. It was the advice that was the best advice to say, hey, and coming from your dad, it's always, or your parent, it's always, it's good, because that's what you
that.
go to.
Well, no matter what, they still love you. Even if they act badly.
Yeah.
It's the only way to express that love. Yeah, my idea was extremely difficult to live with. We're doing well with my mother-in-law, but, we moved on to the my dad, because one of us would be dead. My dad was a 70-pro boxer.
Oh, yeah,
So,
yeah.
but,
Yeah.
until recently, I understand.
It was a straight shot for me, which was great. It is a straight shot for me. Randomly changed the
I will say that I had an uncle. When you think about it, I think about it. I still see when you walk in downtown and do the daily thing. I go to that, it's all small town.
Yeah, no.
And when I go to certain places, I can just like I can just remember to see him walking down the street to the post office.
Yeah.
Just because that's what he did and that's who he was. And I see that with my dad too. I think it's because friends telling me get back on track. I mean, what do you need? Just because this is happening. Good. Was I told you something? I told you, he told you it was, and then she said, okay, well, sorry, but how do I get back to it? That's what I'm really accepting it. Saying, how do I get what's the best thing you just asked me for? I'm going to a little bit of help along.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's what we're doing. So I'm going to make a note. Go through your.
All right, thank you.
It's really one discussion like this.
Yes, that's true. And I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks again, Mike. I appreciate it.
Okay, welcome back. So we're going to go through, I'm going to hand out a list of 10 quotations. The title of this list, besides being is is our language sexist or racist? Okay. We've been seeing recently in this country an upsurge in interest in how we treat each other, how men treat women, how the dominant culture treats the minority cultures. And a lot of this is reflected in the language we use. A lot of it is absolutely unconscious. So what I want you to do is actually work as a group. I'm going to stay out of it while you're working together and just listen to what your discussion is. Because I've, of course, been through this exercise. I used it in my last communications class. But as I said, there are 10 of these. Many of them are statements that are either we've all heard repeatedly or are close enough that we're familiar with. And what I want you to do is think about how they would sound, how they do sound, and how they can be interpreted as either racist or sexist, or perhaps even both. Okay. And then how you could reword them if you think that they are, obviously, how you could reword them to make them neutral. Okay. So.
I don't hear anybody discussing these. Work together. All right. In the old TV and movie westerns, the heroes always had white hats and the villains always had black hats. Always.
Yeah. I mean.
That's one I hadn't interpreted yet. Very good. Well, when I was young, Westerns were the mainstay of television. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You, pick groups, like white hats. Would you, like, for me, I got my own hat, but white hat is, newcomer. You say I'm a part of the, or iron workers have brown hat. And they call themselves, oh, we're the better people, although iron guys are the that's something more. So it could, I mean, I see it as racist, because you do set yourself up.
I mean, it's supposed to be like a separating factor, but the color part of it doesn't have anything to do with the colors, just that separating differential. But it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with, I don't think. But maybe it's talking about in the old westerns that like the good guys wore the white hats because then considered the guy. Given that time, they consider white people black if it's not considered that way, then obviously yes, I'm racist, but it's just color. Right. Well, like,
about the color of your skin.
yeah.
It can be the segregation of a group. Like, for people against the rich people, that can be racist. So then would it be racist, like, it could be, they would the good guys versus bad
Could be
guys.
the tone of voice you say. I mean, that could kind of denote some kind of a separation from.
And who you're saying that to,
Yeah.
how they construe it.
I suppose it could be interpreted.
I think that's neutral, because that's. How can you say?
Of course, the marriage. Husband.
Oh.
Husband and wife. Husband. Oh, Lord.
And I'm not numbered. That's why I just started saying neutral.
Oh, not all marriages.
Yes, nowadays. Very, but that would be sexist nowadays. Back in the day. I guess I've never really heard.
Well, because, nobody says, I now pronounce you man and woman. Nobody says that. It's husband and wife.
Or yeah, they don't say husband and woman.
Yeah, and nobody says woman. Woman sounds weird in that sentence, but man doesn't, because you're like more acceptable to accept man as his like role as man, and wife is a different role. You know what I mean? But like it should be husband as a role. When you're entering those vows, you're entering as a husband, not as just a man, right?
And in some gay marriages, a woman is the husband and the woman is wife.
Right.
And then I was sent a Facebook picture by a friend of mine from college, had a picture of himself and his husband. So.
Now pronouncing married. Yeah. What's white ninety?
Oh, yeah, let's talk about some pleasure.
I've heard of black.
I mean, I suppose it's probably gonna be a long thing. It's the white hat thing. This black hat would have a negative connotation.
So would white magic be good?
Maybe.
Let's see if we can have these five. Yeah, it does.
That's right. Just like the hat thing. I'm not too sure about what the actual meaning of that is. I've never heard it used in real life. You know?
Well, black man,
Yeah.
it's considered as native.
Should have better anymore.
I mean, I agree. I don't think it matters.
I personally, I see it
Because of that.
as sexist if a woman would keep her name. I'm old fashioned, but I changed my, yeah, but I've changed my view. With my daughters now, I mean, my daughter would, for instance, she would become a doctor or even a lawyer. And I would want her to keep her name. That's what it would be with, and if she were to get married, to still keep her name. And, but like with me and my wife, it was totally different. It was, that wouldn't have been an option.
You would have been like dishonored if she wouldn't have taken your name.
Well, she would have kept hers and then hyphenated like hers and mine. Yeah, I would have, because I was just raised that way.
Yeah.
But now it's changed. I mean, 20 years ago, 27 years ago, it's way different than it is now. That's what I said. Now I push my daughters more to keep their name, to be more independent, not to rely so much on if you take, you should be considered both. Like if she had a lawyer and stuff, instant going, you can't change your law degree. It's got to be, that would be somewhere where I would say that yes, in this instance, yes, it is sexist, but I do think different. My daughters, I don't want them to totally rely on just a man that's what.
Well, glad your views changed, that's good to have.
Well, I got six daughters, or my daughters, I got 4 ones.
Yeah, you want to keep your name, I suppose.
Well, not just mine, but just in general, just to be, not so, I guess like I said, the world's sexist, everything. If you're a man, you gotta be submissive to the man. But that doesn't always, it's not like that nowadays, even the same sex marriage.
I would keep my name because my son has money. I wouldn't and my son would be the only one with this. No, I'm gonna keep my name, so it means my son has a name. You know what I mean? I wouldn't want to adopt anybody else's name, but I think it's just. Yeah. Well, I'm the only one in my family that has my name on. Because my mom married that was hard. We're all white. But yeah, I wouldn't want that. So I definitely think that whoever said it would be have a sexual mind. Well, sexist mind.
I think so, that's
There's a question.
I have a question. Do all of these have a problem? Like, are all of them either racist or sexist? Because I kept coming across so much.
It depends on how you look at it. I mean, what we're trying to do here is look at things to see how they can be construed as racist or sexist. There are many of these things that are so common. I mean, you know, you guys are confused about we're the good guys, we wear the white hats. I grew up with that, you know. And I first looked at it and I said, well, what's wrong with that? And then I thought about it and said, oh yeah, I know what's wrong with it. And we'll come back to that later. But I think all of them can be construed one way or the other. And the interesting part is when we start talking, listening to you guys talk in detail about them and finding your interpretations. And then you look at it again, Mimi, and say, I didn't think it that way. But now you see why other people might.
Well, I don't know about that. Let's go back to man in the street interviews. Okay, well, now that I read that out loud, so is it talking about like man in the street interviews, like a teacher's going up to any person and interviewing any person and they're like classifying that as a man?
I just thought they were talking about one dude.
Yeah, yeah, I thought so too when I read it, but I think when I read it out loud, I realized it's talking about any person. They're gonna go make an interview with any person in the street and they're now, you know?
Yeah.
So it should be like person in the street instead of. Man in the street.
Thanks for pointing that out, 'cause I didn't notice that.
I didn't either until I read it.
Well, how many times have you heard that phrase?
Never.
You haven't?
Yeah.
Jay Leno used to do that regularly on his show. He'd go down and do a man in the street interview, and he'd interview men, women, children. If I can avoid it, I do.
While I'm doing your work.
Background noise, so I don't watch the TV.
And all my 8-year-old mom.
Yeah, I mean, when my mom was watching the news, I don't on the news. So, maybe I should.
Well,
I've never heard man in the street.
again, this may be a little bit dated in some ways because I'm not sure how many of them are commonly done anymore, but it used to be fairly common on news programs to do man in the street interviews. And I never thought about that as anything other than a title until I read that statement. I said, oh, you mean women don't do these things? You know? I'm not trying to be politically correct or anything, but it does skew our way we think. You know, political correctness is really dumb sometimes, you know, like wait person, give me a break, you know. But there are other things, you know, there are certain words we do not use in public at all that were commonly used. I was raised in the South in Virginia when I was a kid. There are some things that, yeah, man, that I used to hear on a regular basis that I just don't want to hear anymore. So.
Yeah. And if it's sexist tone, then you can consider it sexist, because most people think that the woman should stay home with the kid, or the man go run the business, or go run some errands, or it couldn't be taken. And personally, I'd rather go run the errands, be stay home with the kids. I'm staying home, so that's one of those ones that didn't have that perspective on, really.
Here, kind of sounds like they're saying that.
Yeah.
It's not what it says. John stayed home to babysit.
Oh,
His son.
wow. Well,
Who's a babysitter? Someone who's not related. When the wife stays home to take care of the child, you don't say the wife stayed home to babysit the kid. No. But the husband, the father is babysitting. Why isn't the father taking care of his child? Mindset. It's all about mindset. We think that women are the child carers. You know, and women are nurturers, yes, but men can be too. In fact, if we're not, we're doing our kids a big disservice. And our spouses.
Oh, yeah, super racist. So like, or do you want us to record them?
Yeah, how would you reword that number 7?
Give us a message.
whatever is from India, you could break up.
Yeah, so my friend, yeah. He's from India. Like that. Right? He's a regular guy, but it doesn't, it just because he's from India.
I feel like the word for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think it matters if you have it in the middle.
Oh, well, yeah. Like, who's that? It's like, ghost, regular guy, you know? You could just take out India. Yeah, and you took out the matter where he's from. Yeah. They're two separate things, and like the way that it's worded in there means they're like related, you know? But he acts like a racist. He's normal.
What does a regular guy look like?
Average.
I'm not bald, so.
We're not regular.
Thank you, I appreciate that. But what is a regular guy? When you hear that term, what do you see? White European. That's what you see in this society. Right?
You want to say it.
Got to tell it like it is.
Well, I mean, that's, okay, so let's go to India and let's ask some guy there, what's your definition of regular guy? And they'd be like,
Him.
an Indian
Yeah,
guy, you know?
like someone who looks like me. Yeah, that's right. And that's exactly what'll happen. I can guarantee you.
So, but number, all right, so clearly racist. Number 8, though.
Moving on now, moving on.
I know a woman lawyer and a man.
It's like, how was that?
Yeah, I mean, I think either way.
I don't think it
Because,
matters.
yeah, I don't think you have to say woman lawyer, like, I know a lawyer, I know. I'm sure I have to put his name. Shouldn't have to, right?
I think that one would definitely depend on who's reading it or who your audience is. If it could be interpreted as it, but I think as it's stated, it's just that.
Well, I'm sure you've all seen the movie Meet the Fockers, where he's a male nurse, how he introduced him. Oh, and by the way, he's a male nurse. You know, just the connotation of male nurse, it's like this racist. I mean, because you're still trying to put that person at a lower level as what you are because he's a male as a nurse or a woman. Like they're being, yeah.
And do the better job.
Yeah,
When
because
you
if you were. this is John Mail lawyer. But it's like Sarah, oh, this is Sarah, I'm a lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm Sarah. Yeah.
And I know-
It's the same way. Oh, she's a nurse. Oh, yeah, he's a male nurse.
I guess if you look at it though, in everyday things, I guess you can see how. I guess I went out to look at it a little more, how when people say. They put it in a sexist or racist way of how they say it. Like if you said, oh, this is so-and-so, she's a female lawyer. You know, I mean, it's, instead of just saying, oh, this is so-and-so, she's a very good lawyer. I mean,
Right, if we were just talking about how we know a lawyer and a nurse, there's no reason for us to necessarily say they're male or female.
Have you ever heard someone say, oh, I know a male lawyer and a female nurse? Right, exactly. You don't hear it because we have gender stereotyped those roles.
Oh, yeah. I'd say it's racist and sexist.
It's definitely generalizing all the women and all the men. And
There's a lot of them that one sentence.
yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, what about the Chinese basketball players? Over 7 feet tall.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and if you ever do happen to go to a place like Asia, and you start looking at the people, they're as varied as we are. Or as anyone else on the planet is, in any other society. There are short people, there are tall people. There are skinny people, there are fat people. There are male people and female people. And they vary all over the map. So, yeah. And I think you're right, meaning it's both. Because it also goes on about the shortness of Asian women. And I don't know, I've known some pretty tall Asian women. So, and by pretty tall, I mean taller than me. Look up to them. Since I'm not that tall. How about the last one?
that's very nice.
There's no way to reword it.
I'm not going to argue with that statement. One of those things that instead of saying it, we go. But you can see, you can see that there are lots of ways that are standard language that we use. You interpreting the white hats and the KKK role, that was an interpretation I haven't had, but it does tell you that just because you have a white hat doesn't make you individual. And some people don't, and the other members of that organization, you might think.
That's probably why they chose white hats. Because they thought they were the good guys.
They chose white hats because of their basic racism. Let's talk about white. This actually goes back to the Middle Ages when people from mainly, early Portuguese explorers were going into Africa and meeting Africans, black people. The theory was that white was the symbol of purity. White dove, white unicorn. It's only been since Queen Victoria that white dresses were common. That's when that started. So it's not been around that long. But white has always been seen as a color of purity. And you would be absolutely astonished at the number of very prominent scientific minds who have promulgated the idea that white is better, is the good color. This goes back to Sir Isaac Newton, and even further back. So it was part of the justification for enslaving Africans in this country. Well, they're obviously not as, if not as good. And if we take them up north, they'll gradually turn white. That was the theory. Now it's happened simply because all the women were raped by white men, started producing, mixed race kids, that gradually, as those genes diluted out, became whiter skin. But that's not what happened. Very interestingly, about 3 months ago, there was a report of a mummified remains of a human that were turned up in the bog in Britain. That person had black skin, blue eyes, 6,000 years old. And that's, so that really throws a whole new light on the whole issue of race. Race doesn't exist, not genetically. There are obvious different genes that express, but if you take a random sampling of genetic material from a random sampling of people, of every single racial, ethnic, etc. group, the only thing you can do is say, this half are female and that half are male. That's it. There are some very sophisticated tests that can show a few minor differences, but the differences within any group, whether it be Asian or Indian subcontinent, Asian, South Asian, or African, or Central American native populations, Maya, Inca, etc. The variation within those groups is greater than the variation across all of humanity. On average, we are the same. And yet we have very looks, skin tone, everything. Doesn't matter. But the theory that brought it up was that white was good and that black or Asian or everybody else was inferior. And this was a very British thing. But it started with the Portuguese. The Portuguese started the slave trade. The Quakers in New England had slaves. The biggest slave trade port in the 1600s was Providence, Rhode Island. Slavery was rampant throughout the 13 colonies. Gradually, in the north, it was outlawed. But the north was as dependent on slaves as was the south. The south needed the slaves, thought they needed the slaves. Grow cotton. The north needed the cotton to run their industries. So they were both dependent on that. And it has survived true to today. It's all based on this idea that white, this is about the white hat thing. But white is good. White magic. Black magic is evil, right? We all know that. So the obvious, the opposite of evil is good. The opposite of black is white. Therefore, white magic is good magic. Still magic. Still violates a lot of religious principles, no matter what it is, right? But it's still magic. But this is where all of this sort of racism comes from. And as for the sexism part, women have always been considered less than men. And that's throughout virtually every society we have. And that whole thing about changing last names, I tell you what, my family had a fit when my wife did not change her name. In fact, they wrote letters to her using my last name. She threw them away. And we told them they stopped doing it finally. After we had our first grandchild. They stopped, but it took a long time. And much the same as you with your daughters, when my wife and I were getting married, she said, well, you want me to change my name? And I said, look, you've got your passport, you've got your degrees, you've got your profession. Why? So no, don't bother. We didn't hyphenate it either. Bolingbroke did not sound like it. We joke with my older daughter as to whether she's going to change her name. You know, there was some debate there. My younger daughter, when she got married, did not. And then she has a third name, her pen name. She had her first novel. So she has a pen name. But she didn't change her name officially either. So my older daughter is Burke in North Carolina when they were born. We just didn't fight the law that said the name of the surname of a child had to be the surname of the husband of the mother, even if the husband wasn't the father. Yes, that resulted in a court case while we were there that got that law knocked down. A woman had a baby that was fathered by a man that was not her husband. She was separated, was not her husband at the time, and the state said, well, it has to be your husband at the time you were impregnated. It has to be his name. Well, they beat that one out in court. Finally, the court said, no, that's not legal. So she won, but it took a while. So we ended up, both of our girls are Burks. Our older daughter is going to marry a Beckinsale. That's his name. Last name is Beckinsale. I said, are you going to change your, we were talking about that. You're going to change your name, you hyphenate it. And so my younger daughter who has, oh no, we're going to call them the Beckenbergs. Why not make up a name? And I met a couple one time, they just made up a last name. They got so tired of hearing, well, are you going to change your name? They just made up a last name and both of them changed. So this is, go to Spain. You're going to have two last names. You know? Castilla y Vega. I know someone by that name. I used to work with her. So, there are, it's a societal thing. In England, they used to change the name. So that's what the standard was here. There's no law. There is no law anywhere, at least currently, that says you have to change your name. Most people do it out of custom, and usually to placate their family members. A lot of people won't do what we did and say no. And it's very, very common. So, but that's an old one. The whole thing about a female lawyer. I mean, I have worked with some of the best lawyers I've ever worked with. Pardon?
They're not arguing.
They know how to win, but they're also very, very, they're very thorough about what it is. I mean, and that's not to say that the men lawyers I've worked with haven't been. But it has nothing to do with anything other than gender stereotypes. And blacks are confrontational. Well, I'll tell you what. Germans are confrontational. Right?
Confrontational
Where it's needed.
yeah.
And some people are just a little more open about it. Doesn't matter what race you are, since I don't believe race has a meaning. But it doesn't matter what you are. We just saw a play here in Fort Collins. It was at the dinner theater here in Fort Collins. Ragtime. Ragtime is a place set in the early 1900s. And it has a tremendous racial component to it that was kind of interesting to look at because, you know, it was really obvious that this black man who was standing up for himself and his child and the child's mother got into trouble. And it was all due to racism. And not a very happy ending. Nonetheless, a very, very clear story. But if we look at this whole white thing, and it all comes out of these theories that white is good. You go to other places in the world, and white is not good. I remember being absolutely stunned one time when I saw a picture of a Chinese wedding about 8 or 9 years ago, where the bride was wearing white. In China, white is the color of death. Not a good color. But white because that's what the West uses. They were emulating the West. Traditional Chinese weddings, the bride is red. That's the color of happiness. So it all depends on your culture. In British culture, they had embraced, in Europe, the Northern European culture had embraced the idea that white was good. White was better. White was superior to everything else. So they could then look down their noses on anyone who was not their shade of white. So that's the reason the Brits could treat the Irish so badly. I'm Irish by extraction. Was because they were actually lighter skinned, whiter, but they were not British white. They were Celtic. They had a red head and blue and green eyes, and therefore they were bad people. In Australia today, we call someone ginger. It refers to their hair being red, and it's an insult. So it all depends on where you are. How we use our language really biases the way. And one of the things that in a truly pluralistic society, we should be examining that, because in reality, as Enrique and I were talking about using the class, we have a cooperative society. We have to work together and help each other. You can't help somebody you have no respect for, or that you actively hate because they are Black, Hispanic, Muslim, Catholic, whatever it is that you dislike. So we want to be looking at our use of language. And think about it. It's not that we have to be so careful that we end up saying, well, if I say this thing, is no. But to be, but to be cognizant of the way that we can bias our own thinking, and bias other people against it. We see it a lot in our society. So what we want to do when you're communicating, that's a great way. You get somebody, some KKK guy gets up there and he starts going on and on and on, and using the N-word and all sorts of stuff. What do? I don't know about you, but my ears full. I dismiss them as idiots. And I shouldn't dismiss them as idiots, because they're not. They're misguided, maybe. They're not idiots. They just have a very wrong idea as to what's right compared to my idea. Admittedly, they might think I'm an idiot. But I'll tell you, and people can change. I have a cousin who's to call it racist would be to minimize the situation. His second wife had a daughter that she brought to the marriage who was handicapped. She had been in an automobile accident and driving drunk, and was in an automobile accident, was quadriplegic. So she still was a drinker. So she started going to AA, and she met Coy, who really liked her, and she developed a real liking for him. Coy turned out to be black. My cousin had a fit. And then he started thinking, he said, I can destroy my marriage, or I can accept this man. And he did. So there's hope. There's always hope. But it's a matter of looking at how you think. You know, I don't know how we take it from anybody else, but at least in that situation, you could look at it and say, this is for the betterment of everybody. So it's really an interesting phenomenon. It's something that bears some work. There's been an awful lot of material published. Some of the in recent years, some of it's worth looking into, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to talk about communication, and communication is what this is. You don't want to alienate your audience by making a statement that everybody's going to then be sending out lots and lots of tweets and calling you an idiot about, as we see happening with our current president on a regular basis. And that's not communication. None of it is. I look at it and I think this is just silly. And if you weren't president of the United States, nobody would take you seriously. But it's silly. So we want to get away from that. If we really want to have a society where people talk to each other, we can go and have to. And that's part of it. So that's what I really wanted. That was the purpose of that particular exercise. I really enjoyed listening, talking through it, because this is the second time I've done it. The conversation the last time was very, very different with that group of students. And it got lively when we ended up talking as a complete group. I had a large class and I divided into 2 groups. And we got to talking later, and people began really looking and analyzing these and saying, well, you know, what if we said it such and such a way? Sometimes it worked for me, and sometimes it didn't for me. But the key there is for me. It doesn't have to work for everybody. But when we're aware of how we speak, then we are also aware of how we sound. Let's take a look at some of those. Now let's talk about tone. Everybody knows about tone. You know, we've all had the experience of having people say something to us in a tone of voice that made us unhappy, to say the least. Sometimes that's deliberate, and sometimes it isn't. I know some people that just love sarcasm, and sometimes it can be absolutely funny if you're not on the receiving end of it. But you know where sarcasm comes from? It comes from a Greek word that means to rend flesh as by a dog. In other words, to tear something to bits. That's what sarcasm is. When we look at medicine, sarcoma, a deadly form of cancer. Sarcophagus, people are buried in death. So sarcasm is something that I see used by people who are mainly people who have a particular political or other bias that they're pushing. And they're making fun of other people's beliefs. And of course, as soon as you do that, you've lost all of that group. They're dismissing you. Which means anything that you have to say that's worthwhile. And many of them actually have some things to say that probably should be factored into the thinking. But you're going to dismiss them and everything they say. You're going to lose the opportunity to possibly learn a few things. But sarcasm is something we use a lot. Comics love it. Because as I say, if you're not on the receiving end, it can be hilarious. And if you are, then you know it's not so much fun. But humor itself is, again, a cultural phenomenon. We look at people who look like us, right? And we think that they're going to be similar to us. But people who ostensibly look like, you know, like all of us. I'm talking about, I'm going to tell you about an incident that happened to us when we were in New Zealand. We spent a lot of time in New Zealand and Australia. And the humor is very different down under than it is up here. We were in Auckland, and we wanted to see a movie. We had been months without seeing any movie. And The Goodbye Girl was playing. The Goodbye Girl was a play. Neil Simon wrote it. And it was a very popular play on Broadway in the 60s. And it was New York Jewish in humor. So we're sitting in this theater, and the actors that were in the movie were Richard Dreyfuss and Ellen Burstyn, who were very, very good actors. And very funny, could be absolutely hilarious. And so we're sitting in there and they're going through this play, and Susan and I are just literally rolling on the floor. And then we notice that we're in a theater full of people. There are two of us laughing. Two of us. Everybody else is, what's with them? And we realized that they didn't get any of the jokes, because they were New York Jews. And we understood the humor because both of us had connections to New York and into the Jewish community. And we understood what they were doing. We understood the slang. Another one was the producers. I don't know if any of you ever saw that, the original producers. It was a play. It was about a play that was written as part of a scam. And the scam was that they were going to get all these investors to pour a bunch of money into it. It was going to flop, and then they were going to have all that money. And so they wrote a play called Springtime for Hitler. Okay. The funny part is the people who wrote this are all Jewish. Two of them were Holocaust survivors. But they wrote this thing. And of course, in the play, Springtime for Hitler became a wild hit. And they got in trouble. But again, it was funny to people within this society, but not funny outside. It was not real funny at all. And so humor is very much dependent. There's another great story. American comedian goes to Japan. This is in the 1960s. Goes to Japan. And he's on stage and he's doing his shit. And the audience is just roaring with laughter. And he walks off stage and he says, man, I love them. They really had fun. You know, that was great. They understood all my jokes. And finally, the guy that was doing the translation for it said, no, they didn't. You'd finish your joke and I'd say, joke over, laugh now. That would be a word, he said. Humor is very effective if your audience is geared for humor. Now, I doubt, I don't know how likely it is that any of you will end up trying to do something funny again. Or outside this country, so maybe or maybe not, but remember that humor is also individual. The comedians that I grew up with, we've exposed some of them to our daughters, and they just sort of stare at us and say, that's supposed to be. And we, as kids, would just roar at it. So it's culturally dependent, and it's also dependent on the experience of the audience. You go back and look at vaudeville from the early part of the 20th century. Most of that humor would not play today. Some of it was very clearly racist and sexist, and that's one of the reasons it didn't play. Blackface just doesn't go over these days, for instance. But it all depends on that. So humor can be very effective. Humor is great. A little bit of humor thrown in can be a very effective tool in the presentation. People remember when you make them laugh. But you're not comedians. Humor is good for breaking things up, especially if you're talking about, if you're talking about a super serious problem, like the Me Too movement that's going on right now. I don't see the place for a lot of humor in that, because it's just plain not funny. The same with other things that have gone on. You wouldn't want to do a comedy skit about a school shooting. That would not go over well. So and we just saw a couple of times when people have gotten in serious trouble by saying things that they said were jokes. Were they? I don't know. You can claim anything's a joke. But it got Roseanne kicked off her own show. Okay. So you have to be very, very careful about what you say. Michelle Wolf getting in trouble with making fun of Sarah Huckabee Sanders recently is another example of someone who probably stepped over the line for the Washington Press Club dinner. Even though usually they have a lot of jokes, they usually have a comedian. But she just went to a place that many people were uncomfortable with. And I'm not passing on the quality of anything she said or the truth or anything else. I don't know. I just remember all the kerfuffle about it. So we have to be a little careful. As I say, a little humor is great. Throw in the joke or two. I start off a lot of my math classes talking about some of my favorite t-shirts. One of which is 5 out of 4 people have trouble with fractions. Think about that one for a second. Yeah. Yep. But but there are ways of throwing a little humor into something that are kind of. Here's another one for you. My password is the last 8 digits of pi. Remember what we discussed about pi in class last night? They've taken it to 1 trillion digits and haven't gotten to the last one yet. And they won't, because of the nature of the number. So there are no last 8 digits. So, there are ways of you can have some fun with things, and you can make little jokes that are neutral. Nobody's going to be insulted by 5 out of 4 people have trouble with fractions. It's not racist. It's not sexist. And as far as I know, mathematicians are not a protected class yet. You can get away with it. But you just have to, you have to remember that your audience needs to be prepared for it. And it needs to be able to receive it. Anything that you might consider in bad taste, don't say. Easy. Not even as a joke. Don't even repeat it just because some television personality said it. Doesn't bear it, and it doesn't hold up. So that's, that's part of our choice of language is a part of what I consider nonverbal communication. Although, yes, the words are verbal or written, and they are communication. Our choice is sending a subliminal message, as all nonverbal communication does. Sends in a subliminal message. And we need to be careful. Part of nonverbal communication is facial expression, rolling your eyes. Somebody says something, you know that you've said something that bothered them, or something that they consider to be so obvious as trivial, or something. You said, you've done it. That's a form of nonverbal communication. Comedians use that. There was an old comedian. Eddie Cantor had these gigantic eyes. He looked like he had gone a lot. He looked like a fish. His eyes were so big. And he would roll those eyes and do things. And the audiences would just roll on the floor. Because he could say more with an expression on his face than most of us could with a 25-year-old. Because he knew how to do it. But that was part of his act. Okay, let's look briefly at the two other assignments for this week. Week 1, assignment 2, the persuasive message. And this is one where you will actually write essentially a script. Identify a workplace situation requiring you to communicate sensitive information to a client. This can either be, bless you, do you need a Kleenex? Okay. This can either be something that's actually happened in your workplace or something that you think could happen. Or make something up. Doesn't have to be in the workplace. It can be, if you can't think of anything in the workplace, think about a family situation. But family situations are always fraught with other emotional content. So you may want to be careful about that in dealing with that. But basically, the components are the attention statement or the setup message or the opening gambit, whatever you want to call it, followed by an introduction. Basically, the opening statements could be, I've got some good news and some bad news, right? And goes from there. An introduction, what are you going to talk about? It's about your job. Okay. The body. Then you go into a discussion. In the body of the presentation is the script of the actual message that you are conveying. And then a conclusion. Yeah. And we've gone through it. It's your job. I have good news and bad news. It's about your job. And you go through and you describe everything. The conclusion. Well, you're being fired. But I want you to know that you're being given a severance package that'll pay your salary for 6 months. Okay. So that's the good news, bad news, right? I'm not setting this up as something to do. I'm just came off the top of my head. So, basically, this does not have to be an APA paper. It's a script. And you can do it as
you know, yourself, the other person. You can set it up as dialogue. You can set it up as whatever way you want. If you've ever seen a script to a play, there's a lot of detail that's not necessary for something like this. You don't have to, you know, exit left or any of that stuff. You know, exeunt omnes. But be aware that this is something sensitive, and sensitive could be, you know, for you, Jessica, might be, you know, you got a serious problem with your car. Yeah, I got that message from my mechanic several years ago. I took my Toyota and it only had 230,000 miles on it. So I was expecting it to go at least 3, you know. And I took it in, and Doug said to me, I got bad news for you, Mike. Okay, what? He says, well, your car is going to cost, this is what the car is going to cost today if we try to fix these 3 problems. But I will tell you that within 3 months, you'll be back and it'll cost you at least that much again. I've been there. So we had a little chat. Okay, Doug, what am I supposed to do about it? And he said, if I were you, I'd get a new car. I would not fix it, you know. You know, he cost himself potentially $5,000 or $6,000, but he's an honest mechanic, you know. One of those people you never want to lose from your life, you know. But he cost himself that much, but he gave me the right advice. And so we ended up getting a new car. But want to write this script in a way that you would be happy, not necessarily getting the message, but happy with the way you delivered it. Because it can be tough. Okay? Also, when writing it, ask yourself, if you were on the receiving end, how would you want this message to be constructed to you? Now, place yourself on the other side of that table. And when you're doing that, you know, things would be so much better if people actually thought about these things ahead of time, in many cases. But think about that. Think about what questions they may have. You know, Doug knew I was going to ask, okay, should I fix it or not? And he was real honest. I wouldn't. You know, and he's a guy who actually rebuilds cars from the ground up and races them. So, you know, he might have done that. Interesting sidelight. We got rid of that Camry. And in a bizarre set of circumstances, we found out about 5 years later that it was currently a taxi cab in Dubai. My car. So it probably did hit 300. But it was picked up by somebody who was going to fix it up. But that really was bizarre. Okay. The original on this was telling you to visit the University Writing Center for one consultation. We don't recommend that. If you really want help in how to structure these things, Laura in the Student Success Center is very good. Katie, if you can get an appointment with her because she's very busy, also loves to help people with these things. So, and you can always come to me. I'm reasonably good with these sorts of things. Or you can contact the University Writing Center, which is available through the homepage of the mod. And so there's that. That is assignment 2. Assignment 3 is basically to do the same thing you did with assignment 1, but do the other 5 readings and 3 videos. The material in this class, the readings and the videos, are very, very good materials. And they are here in lieu of an actual textbook, which is why we will be, part of your assignments each week will be to go through, review all that stuff, and tell me what you've learned. Because I really want you all to read this. I think it's very, very good material. I haven't read everything throughout the mod, but the stuff I've read so far, I'm trying to stay ahead of where I want you to be. The stuff I've read so far has been excellent. Okay, ignore some of the names of the websites you go to. They're kind of kinky to me, but the material in them are good. Okay, questions? Okay, we'll reconvene on Monday at 6 o'clock. And thank you all for being here. I'm sorry we didn't have the rest of the class here, but I appreciate the fact that y'all came out in what appeared to be a storm, I guess. I don't know if you guys, it started thundering after I got in this afternoon. So.
Most of the things that we're looking at and like delivering bad news, it's really kind of more about being direct, not being brand push, not giving a huge explanatory explanation. It's not really the best way to deliver bad news.
Right.
And we include some of those 500 words like that in our script.
What I think you'll find is you'll have no trouble doing 500 words, especially if you're being direct. You wouldn't deliver it as a series of choppy phrases. So think about how you would actually say something in the most sympathetic and empathetic way you can. I think you'll not have any trouble with 500 words. But you may have trouble keeping it shorter than 1,000. Okay? All right, everyone, thank you.